Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we are well into our 36th season, I talk to writers about their craft, what they're working on, what they've accomplished in the past, what they might be planning. It's a slightly wider net than that, however. We have had on sculptors, we've had on musicians, we've had on painters. So if you have an idea for a writer who might be a good guest for the Writer's Block, send in our suggestions, whether it's a writer or another brand of artist, and look for our address at the end of the program. We'd be glad to get your suggestions. I also want to remind you that cable access television, a wonderful community product, is available because you subscribe to cable. It is not available with other means of accessing the internet. So you stick with cable, stick with the Writer's Block. Tonight, I'm very happy to say we have a guest very, very well known in Cape Ann and eastern Massachusetts by the name of, I'm going to get the name right with the married name and the stage name, Daisy Nell Collinson. She is a musician, a writer, and a teacher. And we're very happy to welcome her back after an absence of, I believe, 10 years.
Yeah, I was thinking it's 10 years.
Well, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. This is great.
We are here to talk about a new book of your many books, Mrs. Murphy's Chowder. And I want to mention to our audience a couple of other books that you've that you've written. The Stowaway Mouse, a wonderful title. Tea for a Bluebird, Rocky at the Dockside, Trey and the Pirates, Captain Stan's Foo-Foo Band. And I want to mention that book specifically because it refers to your husband and playing partner, Stan Collinson,
right?
With whom you often perform,
right?
And we might have him on one day. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
But you are a prolific author. These aren't all your books.
No.
And you have produced and written a brand new book.
Right.
We're going to have the JPEG on of the book. I'm going to hold it up so we can have both means of projecting here. Mrs. Murphy's Chowder. It's a wonderful book. And a very, very presentable book. It's a hardbound copy,
right.
Done in cooperation with the Phoenix School in Salem.
Right. The Phoenix School in Salem is it's an unusual school. It's a cooperative learning school. It's a small school started by Betsy Sargent over 25 years ago now. And it was in response to not being able to start a charter school. So she started the Phoenix School with a woman named Barbara McFall, and they were the two main teachers. And a good old friend of mine now sadly passed away, Sarah Gregory Smith, a great folk singer and contradance caller. She and her husband Bill Smith are well known around here for years. She was the music teacher there, but her main calling was actually teaching science. So she asked me if I would like to take over her job. And Betsy Sargent said yes, as long as she knows Mrs. Murphy's Chowder.
The old song.
The old song. Sarah and Bill worked at a camp in New Hampshire, and this was the kids' favorite song. And so when she started teaching music at the Phoenix School, it was an instant hit. And when I say an instant hit, I'm talking about kids. There are 28 kids in the school, kindergarten through 8th grade, which means there aren't a lot of any one class, but they all know the song. From the first week of school, somehow, by either osmosis or wishful thinking, they can sing the whole song, the whole chorus, which has 22 ingredients of this crazy chowder.
Would you do us the great favor of reading the opening 3 paragraphs of your foreword, which for me captures the basic direction, also mentions the Phoenix School.
Right. The seeds of this book were planted by chance. I've used folk music in my teaching at nursery schools throughout middle schools since 1975. Several songs that I've taught for many years at the Phoenix School in Salem, Massachusetts, appeared on a list I was going to sing with the kindergarten through 8th grade students at the start of the 2024 school year. We always sing as a group, as it's a small school where the youngest learn quickly by just singing with their older partners. Along with the familiar songs, rounds, and ballads, there was the standard final song of each singing session, Mrs. Murphy's Chowder. When I first started teaching music at the Phoenix School in 1987, the inclusion of the rambling, rollicking Mrs. Murphy's Chowder had already been embedded in the school culture by my predecessor, Sarah Gregory Smith. She knew this old campfire favorite was a valuable ingredient in the evolving culture of the Phoenix School. Even the youngest can learn the crazy chorus after just singing it a few times.
That's a good homage to Phoenix and your friend that you mentioned before you read that. Can you give us a summary now of the story that is the plot of Mrs. Murphy's Chowder?
So Mrs. Murphy's Chowder is basically a song about the crazy ingredients of a chowder that nobody in their right mind would eat. But that list of songs that I was mentioning in the foreword was a connection between them, was maybe here, maybe there, but they saw this list and I said, well, today we're going to sing the song about the apple pickers. We're going to sing that round called Happiness Runs. We're going to sing a song about windmills in the old days in England. And then we're going to sing that round about black socks. The longer you wear them, the better they get. And the kids were thinking, oh yeah, these are great. I know these songs. So I said, well, before we do that, I want you to go off in your teams and see if you can make a story out of what each of these songs is about. And they came back after 15 minutes with this hilarious idea. And so I said, well, what's going to tie this together? And what's going to tie this together? I don't know. Let's think some more about this. So I threw another song in there, and that's a ballad, an old English-Scottish ballad that was originally called The Elfin Knight. And the American version of it is called The Cambric Shirt. And the cambric shirt. Cotton yes, shirt. A little bit like chambray. And those of you who have listened carefully and are thinking, I wonder if that's the same cambric shirt that was in the Simon and Garfunkel song, Scarborough Fair, can you make me a cambric shirt? Tell her to make me a cambric shirt. And that is the old ballad that Simon and Garfunkel made into a popular song. And so this ballad has a chorus. The version I taught them has a chorus that is fum-a-lum-a-lie, fum-a-lie-lo-lee. And so after each line, are you going to the fair? If you can find my true love there, tell him to make me a cambric shirt. And then the ballad has the elf is supposed to be testing potential true love. And so what the song says, tell him to make me a cambric shirt, tell him to not have any needlework in it, tell him to wash it in a well that's dry, tell him to buy me an acre of land that's between the seashore and the sea, and then tell him to plant it all with one kernel of corn and cut it all down with a peacock feather. And then when he's all done with that, bring me my cambric shirt. And in between each of those lines is this fum-a-lum-a-lie, fum-a-lie-lo-lee, hiddle-o-diddle-o, fum-a-dum-a-diddle-o, fum-a-lum-a-lie, fum-a-lie-lo-lee. And so that becomes the story, where I had the kids' ideas and I had these songs, and I asked if they would mind if I tried to hone it down a little bit from their ideas and make it into a story. So this story,
this is the story.
This is the story that became the book. And so the story involves an elf on his way to a fair. And
yes, I want to make sure the audience understands how this chowder, which had this terrible ingredient.
Yes. Oh, you want me to say the name of the things that are in the chowder?
Well, eventually.
Okay.
But I think people I want to get across that this chowder doesn't wind up terrible.
Oh no, it's a way to fix the chowder.
It's good chowder.
Right.
Mrs. Murphy's makes good chowder, but it has a detour.
It has a big detour, and that's part of the story. And the idea is that this chowder has a long list of crazy ingredients. And I asked the kids to draw each ingredient, because what they didn't know that was cooking in my brain was that I was going to turn this into a story where the only way to fix this terrible chowder was for a magic elf to make a potion that stirred in all these drawings of all the bad ingredients, and it would magically turn into really good chowder. And Mrs. Murphy
How did the bad ingredients get in there in the first place?
Well, you're going to have to read the book. Oh, no. So what happens in the story, the elf is walking along the road, and he sees an elf who's mumbling to himself, fum-a-lum-a-li, lo-li, and he said, is this a magic chant? And he said, yes, something terrible has happened to Mrs. Murphy's chowder. And so he said, see those kids across the street? They're from a school called the Phoenix School, and they draw everything they learn. And I want you, he says this to little Tommy Tucker, who's walking down the road, go over there and get those kids to draw all the things that are in the chowder. And I'm going to make up a magic potion, and we're going to take it down to the fair, and we're going to stir it in Mrs. Murphy's chowder pot, and it's going to fix the chowder so that everybody will be happy. Because right now, nobody wants to buy that chowder. It's been ruined by all these crazy ingredients, and not only that, it smells. And that's when the part where the kids had written their part was that somebody had stirred those black socks that were in the story. I was telling you that there was a song about black socks. One of the kids said, well, the chowder is terrible because there are black socks in there. And so the idea of the chowder smelling bad, the kids took great pride in knowing that this is an important part of their aspect of the story.
Who originally sabotages the chowder?
Well, we're not really sure who did this because they're only referred to as troublemakers. We didn't want to point the finger at anybody in particular in the story, so it just became some troubled people came along and raised a terrible ruckus.
So chowder vandals.
Exactly. Who knew there were such things out there as messing up Mrs. Murphy's chowder, the most famous chowder in the land. People would line up for miles, come to the fair and get their bowl of chowder. And so that's how the story moves on. The kids all agree that they're going to draw. In the story, they're going to all draw one of the ingredients. And in fact, in real life, at school, the kids all drew these ingredients. And there were 28 kids in school and 22 ingredients in the chowder. So the last few ingredients weren't part of the chowder, but they were things that had to do with the chowder. Like after dinner, Uncle Ben used to fill his fountain pen from a bowl of Mrs. Murphy's chowder. So somebody drew the fountain pen, somebody drew Uncle Ben. And then if we had some here today, we might find a Chevrolet. Somebody drew the Chevrolet. And so all these ingredients are in the book, actually in a gallery.
I want to hold this up.
Yes.
So that Emily, our director, can zoom in, I hope, on this. Those drawings by real students at the Phoenix School with their names underneath the drawings are in the end pages of Daisy's book, Mrs. Murphy's Chowder. These are actual drawings by actual kids at the Phoenix School.
K through 8. Now, in the story, the chowder, the elf is hiding behind the chowder pot. And one by one, he stirs in these drawings. And all the time, he's chanting the chant that was in that ballad that I taught the kids. Fum-a-lum-a-li, lo-li, hiddle-o, diddle-o, and so forth. And he's stirring in these drawings and hoping that it's going to change the chowder back to the beloved real Mrs. Murphy's chowder, which does not have all those things in it. But it's the most famous chowder in the land. The illustrator of this book, George Ulrich, who is a genius of an illustrator, came to school, and this is we sit on the floor. It's all one huge room, and they're all hanging on every word that George said. He said, well, tell me about Mrs. Murphy's chowder. So we sang the song. As we're singing Mrs. Murphy's chowder, George on a whiteboard has got a Sharpie, and he drew a drawing. And it looks an awful lot like Mrs. Murphy right here on the cover. And they couldn't believe it. There was no do-over on any line. It was just he drew. He started drawing and drawing and drawing, and there was Mrs. Murphy. And they were flabbergasted. They were so impressed because this really is a school where they draw everything. And everything gets into their heads, having learned it in their cooperative learning style and inquisitive learning style, and then they draw it. and then sometimes they sing it. And so
they had a chance to meet and observe a real master.
They did, and we talked about how you draw, how the difference between an artist and an illustrator. And in my mind, it's sort of like in the old days when we'd go to the circus, you'd see the clown coming out on skates. Well, before he was a funny clown, he was a good skater. Well, before George could be an illustrator, he had to be a good artist. Any illustrator has to be able to draw. And what you can do in an illustration is amazing. One line can look exactly like the smile. One little dot can be what their eye, it's amazing.
Cartoon masters have that down.
Exactly, and so what he explained, and I showed them some other books that I'd written, that you start with a thumbnail sketch. I mean, and you know this from your filmmaking days, you have something like a storyboard where you take the text and you decide where the page breaks are going to be and which illustration is going to go with each part of the story that you want to illustrate. Yeah. And how much is too much? How much isn't enough? So you want to make sure you're highlighting the things that need to be illustrated. And these are children's books, so it needs to be something that even a person who can't read yet could tell, oh look, there's an apple tree. Oh look, there's the elf. It's really a remarkable process, but you start off with these little thumbnail sketches that are the size of a postage stamp, and it shows a few things in it. This is a tree, this is an apple, this is an elf. And then the next one is going to be people walking down the road. And you decide, looking at those thumbnails, that those are the ingredients you want to have in your illustrations. So the next phase after that is to turn that into a sketch. And then the next after that, if you approve it, is turned into coloring it in and using a combination of watercolor and gouache. Yeah. Well, the kids, when they went off to do their drawings of all the ingredients in the chowder, because they were going to be illustrators in this book as well, they listened to every word that George said, and when they came back to show me their work, they brought me a thumbnail. And I said, oh, of course.
And so they're in the book.
And well, then they went and finished the drawing, and the finished drawings became. Right. And George created a way in the layout with the designer, and I did a layout where the big chowder pot is being stirred, and these drawings had to be shrunk down to look like they were getting put into a chowder pot
to make the ingredients disappear.
Yeah, to fix the chowder.
You have in the book a list of the ingredients, the terrible ingredients that the magic is going to destroy.
Yes.
Can you first read the ingredients and then say them at pace, because I know you've memorized them perfectly, and you sang them before we went on the air.
Well,
if you read them first, so that
so in the story, the people in town are so horrified that Mrs. Murphy's chowder has been ruined. They came up with what they're calling their song to describe how awful this chowder is, and what the impetus with little Tommy Tucker and the elf is to convince the Phoenix school kids to draw these pictures so that the townspeople will stop singing this song, because they don't want the song to be more famous for the horrible ingredients than the chowder is famous for being good. But the song that they sang around the town in this story includes ice cream, cold cream, benzene, gasoline, soup beans, string beans, floating all around, sponge cake, beefsteak, mistake, stomach ache, earmuffs, cream puffs, many to be found, silk hats, doormats, bed slats, Democrats, cowbells, doorbells, beckon you to dine, meatballs, fish balls, mothballs, cannonballs. Come on in, the chowder's fine.
Okay, that's a wonderful list, and I think it really has helped, driven by those rhymes.
Oh, yeah.
The rhyme couplets. Now, can you do that again, the way you did before we went on, as a chant or song?
Well, the song just starts off very easily with, after dinner, Uncle Ben used to fill his fountain pen from a bowl of Mrs. Murphy's chowder, 'cause it has ice cream, cold cream, benzene, gasoline, soup beans, string beans floating all around, sponge cake, beefsteak, mistake, stomach ache, earmuffs, cream puffs, many to be found, silk hats, doormats, bed slats, Democrats, cowbells, doorbells, beckon you to dine, meatballs, fish balls, mothballs, cannonballs. come on in, the chowder's fine.
Very well.
The rest of it is afterwards, and everybody sings along, won't you bring back, oh, won't you bring back Mrs. Murphy's chowder, every helping leaves you yelping for the headache powder. And so you can tell it's an old song. I mean, obviously, you're referring to headache powder.
Headache powder, yeah. And cannonballs.
Cannonballs and fountain pens even. But it's really fun. And I know I have to give credit to Betsy Sargent all those years ago, who recognized that this wasn't just any frivolous song. There's a real value in hearing and seeing how songs can go into the ears of a child, and you're sitting next to somebody who knows it a little better than you do, and you're helping out the person next to that one who doesn't know it as well, and somehow there's this group thing that takes over. And I'm going to school in a couple of weeks for the first time this school year, and I can tell you, by the next time I come, everybody, every age, will know this song by heart. The older ones will teach, and they're not going to sing it over and over and over again. It's just that there's magic in that room. When we sit down, and I've got my banjo there, and sometimes I bring along Captain Stan, and we play with these songs with the kids. And
I love your enthusiasm about that. It comes across. I'm sure it comes across with the kids.
I hope so.
That's absolutely a key, necessary quality for good teaching.
Well, you know, it's funny. When I was in school, we used to sing all the time. And we had, you know, we go to music, especially in elementary school, it was all about singing. Nobody bothered to try to teach you notes or anything. I mean, they might have mentioned notes or Bach, Brahms, and Beethoven, but for the most part, it was singing. There's no singing in school anymore unless you really go out of your way to include singing. And some of the songs that are in school are all kinds of cleaned up, and maybe it's about acorns in the fall, or snow in the winter, or leaves in the spring, but it's pretty drab. And these old folk songs are full of all kinds of information about the settling of this country and heading out west and Sweet Betsy from Pike.
And sadly, often when budgets are really constrained,
Yeah.
music curriculum is one of the first things, the arts in general curriculum, one of the first things to be cut.
Absolutely. I do a residency at the Essex Essex Elementary School, second grade every year, and the kids love to sing. And they have a wonderful music teacher, Richard Carpenter, but he's basically band oriented. And so I come in with a banjo and a guitar and friends who play other instruments, and we show them the folk instruments and learn about how we all learn music. We all learn from each other, and which is really what folk music is. But the songs, you know, we use a map and say, I come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee. I'm going to Louisiana, that's right next door. And they're looking at a map and thinking, oh, yeah. And, you know, you have to connect these things sometimes, and then the connections stay. I think those singing is a way of channeling the information in a different way than reading it or having someone talk to you about it. I think it's just an incredible teaching method. And I say that's what Betsy Sargent's big gift in hiring folk musicians to come in and teach. We do folk dancing for May Day celebrations, and all that patterning. You know, educators will tell you that the patterning of dancing, lefts and rights and so forth, those patterns are ingrained in your mind and it just opens up all those other receptors.
So you're very energetically and committedly involved in three forms of creation art. You're a musician, you're an author, and you're a teacher. What is the most important one of those three careers? I'm putting that on the spot. Which do you love most?
Well, I learned everything I learned from motherhood. My own role as a mother involved all of those things, and I really feel as though when you're a parent, it doesn't come with an owner's manual, and I think those God-given talents that I have came into play as a mother. And as soon as they went to nursery school, my kids, I went with them in some way with the music, And I stayed with every grade that they, and I was the music lady that came to school and I thought, you know, it wasn't like, oh God, we have this interfering mother. It was, oh goody, we've got music. And so I was happy to do it, but it was, I think the songs themselves, the subject matter of these songs and the way they're played, the instruments they're played on, are all a part of the chemistry that makes me who I am. And it plays into so many levels. I still teach. I teach, it's based on music, but there's a lot of other stuff thrown in there just because I like to share that. And when I do the commentary for the parade of schooners, for the Schooner Festival,
So, yeah.
it's sharing what I know in a way that it's not a TED Talk. It's just, hey, did you know? And it's just, you know, I always kind of go back to the so what factor as a teacher. I don't want anyone to hear something I've said and say, so what? What I want them to say is, I didn't know that. And
Well, I think that your enthusiasm about all three professions is really, really commendable. And I think that's why you're so effective in every one of them.
Well, you know, you're a writer. You know, when you, people probably ask you as much as they ask me, where do you get your inspiration? Or when do you do your writing? And a lot of people's answer is, or, you know, what's your secret? Well, it just comes. You know, it's something you think, well,
Well,
you know, it's in the shower or driving down the road or some other time when you least expect it. It's a visitation.
I asked the novelist Tim O'Brien once what he thought the absolute key was to successful writing. He said butt time. Sit down and do it.
Well,
we're almost out of time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is a wonderful half hour.
Oh, thank you.
I really appreciate your enthusiasm.
Oh, thank you.
And it's a wonderful quality to have for being a musician, for being an author, being a teacher. So, Daisy, Nell, Collinson, thank you very much for being on the Writer's Block and returning after too long hiatus of 10 years.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed being here. I love seeing you too, because I don't run into you as much as I used to. So this is great.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
I want to thank all of you in cable television land for being with us also. If you've learned something about Mrs. Murphy's chowder and the strange ingredients, then and writing, and enthusiastically so, from Daisy, then the Writer's Block has done its job. Thanks again for being with us, and I hope to see you again next time on the Writer's Block. Good night.